Commander Lucas Trent materialized aboard the dead station with a flash of blue light. The teleporter beam faded, leaving him standing alone in absolute darkness. His breath formed small clouds in the freezing air. Emergency lights flickered once, twice, then steadied into a dim amber glow that barely pushed back the shadows. He looked down at himself and grimaced. Of all the times to answer distress call, it had to be during Admiral Chen's memorial service. He was still wearing his dress uniform, the old style, based on ancient Earth naval traditions from the 22nd century. Dark blue fabric with brass buttons, gold trim on the shoulders, and ceremonial medals that clinked softly as he moved. He felt ridiculous, like a museum piece come alive. The station groaned around him, metal contracted in the cold. Trent activated his wrist scanner. The readings made his stomach drop. Life support had failed completely. The temperature was minus 40 degrees. He had maybe 20 minutes before his uniform's basic heating elements gave out. He moved forward to the corridor, his boots echoing in the silence. Through the viewports, he could see nothing but black. The Kelmar Void lived up to its name, a nebula so thick with exotic particles that it swallowed all light and sensor signals. Ships that entered rarely found their way out. The first body should have been here, according to the ancient distress beacon that had somehow punched through the void after 340 years. The evacuation had been chaotic. People running, panic, systems failing. But the corridor was empty. Personal belongings littered the floor. A child's toy, a data pad. Someone's jacket frozen stiff. But no bodies. No blood. No signs of violence. Just absence. Trent picked up the data pad. Its emergency battery still held a charge. He scrolled through the final entries, his breath catching as he read. Day 47. We confirmed it. The vessel is architect technology. Millions of years old. Dr. Rahman thinks it's some kind of siege ship. Day 52. The ship is responding to our presence. Sections are lighting up. Command wants us to continue observations. Day 58. Something's wrong. The AI keeps shutting itself down. Chen says she's being locked out of core systems by something else. Something inside the station. Day 60, it's awake. God help us. It's waking up. We have to leave. We have to. The log ended there. Trent looked up sharply. A sound had echoed through the station, deep and resonant, like metal grinding against metal. But that was impossible. The station had been dead for centuries. He moved faster now, following the emergency lighting toward the central observation deck. The doors were sealed, but the manual override still worked. He cranked the wheel, muscle straining, until something clicked. The door slid open with a screech of protesting metal. The observation deck was enormous, a dome of reinforced glass that should have offered a panoramic view of space. Instead, it showed only the oppressive black of the void. Trent walked to the center console, brushing ice crystals from its surface. Most systems were dead, but the backup power cell, ancient, reliable human engineering, still had juice. He pressed his palm to the activation pad. Lights blinked to life across the console. External sensors initialized with a series of beeps. And then he saw it. Through the viewport, lights were appearing in the darkness. Not stars, something closer, something massive. As his eyes adjusted, Trent felt his jaw drop. The shape emerging from the black was incomprehensibly vast. A vessel kilometers long, its surface covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living things. Sections of the hull glowed with soft bioluminescence, blue and green, and colors he had no names for. The architect ship, the Leviathan, it was beautiful, terrifying, and it was clearly not dormant anymore. As Trent watched, massive sections of the vessel began to rotate. Ancient mechanisms that had slept for millions of years ground back to life. Lights rippled across its surface in patterns that almost looked like communication, like it was trying to say something. The station shuddered. More lights flickered on in sections that should have had no power. Through the walls, Trent could hear systems activating, one by one, like a giant slowly waking from a very long sleep. His scanner beeped urgently. Energy readings were spiking. The Leviathan was drawing power from somewhere, and it was building fast. Trent stood alone in his ancient uniform, watching something from the dawn of galactic civilization come back to life, and wondered if humanity had just made first contact with something wonderful or something terrible. He suspected he was about to find out. The Leviathan pulsed with light, and Trent couldn't look away. Each wave of luminescence revealed more details of the massive ship. He could see structures that looked like gardens, domes that might have been living quarters, and spiraling towers that served purposes he couldn't even guess. This wasn't a warship. It was a city in space. His wrist scanner chirped again. The energy readings were climbing steadily. Whatever the architect had built, it was gathering power at an incredible rate. Trent needed information, and he needed it fast. He turned back to the observation deck's console. The main computer was dead, but the backup systems were older, simpler. Trent smiled grimly. As the fleet's historical consultant, he'd spent years studying humanity's early space technology. These ancient systems were actually more familiar to him than the modern ones. He pulled out his combat knife and pried open an access panel. Inside, he found what he was looking for: old-style fiber optic cables and manual data ports. He grabbed a salvaged tablet from his belt pouch and jury-rigged a connection using the knife blade as a makeshift adapter. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. Data began scrolling across his tablet. Log files, research notes, sensor readings from 3 centuries ago. Trent's eyes widened as he read. The research team had discovered the Leviathan by accident while mapping the void. At first, they thought it was just another dead hulk, a relic from an extinct species. But then they detected faint energy signatures deep inside. The ship was dormant, not dead, sleeping. Dr. Sarah Rahman, the lead researcher, had decoded part of the architect language. Her notes were excited, almost manic. They were builders, she'd written, not conquerors. They traveled the galaxy planting seeds, ships like this one, filled with knowledge and technology. They wanted to help younger species grow. But there was more. The Leviathan wasn't supposed to wake up randomly. It had specific activation protocols. It was designed to detect intelligent life and respond to certain conditions. The presence of the research station, humanity's radio signals, the electromagnetic signatures of their technology, all of it had triggered the awakening sequence. The team had realized what they'd done and evacuated in panic, afraid of what they might have unleashed. But they'd left the station operational, hoping someone would come back and finish what they'd started. Trent was reading the final entries when a new sound filled the observation deck. It wasn't mechanical. It was almost musical, a series of tones and harmonics that resonated through the walls. The Leviathan was broadcasting something. He routed the signal through his translator. The device struggled for a moment, then began displaying patterns on his screen. Mathematical sequences, geometric problems, questions about physics and chemistry and biology. But they weren't simple equations. Each problem had multiple solutions, and the choices revealed something deeper. One problem asked how to distribute limited resources among a population. Another posed a scenario about contact with a less advanced species. A third dealt with environmental damage and long-term consequences. Trent understood. These weren't tests of intelligence. They were tests of values. The architects wanted to know what kind of species humanity was before giving them access to whatever was inside that ship. His fingers flew across the tablet as he worked through the problems. For the resource question, he chose equitable distribution over efficiency. For the contact scenario, he selected patient observation over immediate interaction. For the environment problem, he picked long-term sustainability over short-term gain. With each answer, sections of the Leviathan responded. New lights appeared. Docking bays opened. Access corridors illuminated. The ship was accepting his responses, inviting humanity inside. Trent felt a surge of pride. Maybe humanity wasn't perfect, but they'd learned from their mistakes. The uniform he wore represented a time when Earth had nearly destroyed itself. But humans had stepped back from the brink. They'd chosen cooperation over conflict. They'd learned to value wisdom over power. Then his scanner screamed in alarm. Multiple hyperspace signatures. Big ones. Trent's blood ran cold as he checked the readings. 6 ships, heavy cruiser class, dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the void. Their energy signatures were unmistakable. Krellian warships. The Krellians were humanity's rivals, aggressive, territorial, and currently in a cold war with the Terran fleet. They must have detected the energy surge from the Leviathan's awakening, and they were coming in hot, weapon systems already powered up. Trent watched on his scanner as the Krellian fleet began moving toward the station. They were demanding something over broad-spectrum channels, but the station's communication array was too damaged to receive clearly. He was alone, unarmed, on a dead station, facing a war fleet. The Leviathan continued its tests, unaware or uncaring about the approaching danger. Trent looked down at his ceremonial uniform, at the brass buttons and old-world medals. He thought about all the ancient naval commanders who'd face impossible odds with nothing but courage and clever words. Time to see if tradition and bluffing could save his life. The Krellian fleet filled his scanner screen, like a pack of wolves closing in. Trent watched them approach, his heart hammering against his ribs. 6 warships against 1 man in a dress uniform. The odds were absurd. The communication array crackled to life with a burst of static. A harsh voice cut through the interference, speaking heavily accented English. "Human vessel, this is Warlord Shakros of the Krellian Dominion. You will surrender control of the alien structure immediately. Failure to comply will result in your destruction." Trent took a deep breath. He'd read about commanders like this in his historical texts. Officers who'd face down superior forces with nothing but confidence and protocol. Time to channel every bit of that old-world military bearing. He straightened his uniform, adjusting the brass buttons and medals until everything sat perfectly. Then he activated the communication system, putting every ounce of authority into his voice. "Warlord Shakros, this is Commander Lucas Trent of the Terran Exploratory Fleet, acting diplomatic representative under the Treaty of New Geneva, Article 7. You are in violation of protected space. This sector has been designated as a scientific research zone under Joint Council authority. Power down your weapons and state your intentions." There was a pause. Trent could almost hear the confusion. On the other end, he was making half of it up. The void had never been formally protected, but he delivered it with such conviction that doubt would creep in. "You dare give me orders, human?" Shakro snarled back. "I have 6 warships. You have a dead station. The artifact belongs to the Dominion. The architect's vessel belongs to no one," Trent replied calmly, still working on Leviathan's tests while he talked. "It is first contact with an ancient intelligence. Claiming it as property would be like claiming the sun or the stars. It goes beyond territorial disputes." Another problem appeared on his screen. This one showed 2 groups competing for a resource, with options ranging from total war to shared access. Trent selected cooperative study, and another section of the Leviathan illuminated in response. Through the viewport, he could see structures that looked like libraries, massive crystalline formations that probably stored data. First contact. Shakros laughed harshly. "I see a weapon, human, a ship of immense power that has slept for ages. Whoever controls, it controls the sector." "Then you see poorly." Trent shot back. He pulled up the research data on his tablet and transmitted it to the Krellian fleet. "Look at the structure. Those aren't weapon systems. They're biodomes, data archives, cultural centers. The architects were teachers, not warriors." While Shakros reviewed the data, Trent continued the tests. Each problem revealed more about architect philosophy. They valued knowledge over power, preservation over conquest, cooperation over domination. They'd built this ship as a gift, not a threat. The Leviathan responded to his answers with cascading waves of light. More sections opened, revealing gardens that had somehow preserved themselves through millions of years, halls lined with crystallized knowledge, chambers that seemed designed for meditation and learning. "Your data proves nothing," Shakros finally responded, but Trent could hear uncertainty in his voice. "The ship's power reading suggests weapon capabilities." "Every ship has power," Trent said. "That doesn't make a weapon. Your own vessels have reactors that could level cities, but you use them for propulsion and life support. Judge the architects by their design, not your fears." He brought up another transmission, this time showing the mathematical tests. "The Leviathan is evaluating us, Warlord. both of our species. It's asking what we value, conquest or understanding, hoarding or sharing. Every answer I give opens more of the ship, and I've been choosing cooperation. On his scanner, Trent saw weapons charging on the Krellian flagship. His gambit was failing. Shakros was about to fire. Then a new test appeared, and Trent's breath caught. The problem showed two species approaching the same resource. The options were claim it first, destroy to prevent the other from having it, or propose shared access. But this time, the test added a wrinkle. Claiming it first would be easy and safe. Sharing would require trust and risk. Trent's finger hovered over the screen. This was it, the moment that would define humanity's relationship with the Architect's legacy. He selected shared access. The Leviathan erupted with light. Every system activated at once, flooding the void with energy signatures so powerful that Trent's scanner overloaded. Through the viewport, the ancient ship blazed like a newborn star. Then a pulse of energy exploded outward from the Leviathan, washing over the station and racing toward the Krellian fleet. Trent grabbed the console as the wave hit, and everything went white. The white light faded slowly, like waking from a dream. Trent blinked, his vision clearing. He was still standing at the console, still alive. The station hummed with new power flowing through circuits that had been dead for centuries. But something had changed. His scanner showed something impossible. Every Krellian warship was still intact, drifting in space. But their weapon systems were completely offline, powered down by technology that made human engineering look like children's toys. The ships themselves were undamaged, just render harmless. Then Trent felt it, a presence in his mind, not invading, not hostile, but they're ancient and patient, like standing before something infinitely old and wise. Words formed in his thoughts, but they weren't his own. Child species, you have reached the threshold. The voice didn't come from the speakers. It came from everywhere and nowhere, gentle but overwhelming. Through the viewport, the Leviathan pulsed with rhythmic light, and Trent understood. This wasn't an AI speaking. It was something more, a consciousness preserved within the ship's core, the last echo of the architects themselves. We knew our time was ending. The presence continued. Trent could feel emotions with the words. Sadness, hope, determination. Our civilization grew old. Our stars dimmed. But we refused to let our knowledge die with us. We built these vessels and scattered them across the galaxy, seeds for younger species to find when they were ready. On his screen, images appeared. The architects as they had been, tall, crystalline beings that seemed to be made of living light. Their cities, their ships, their art. A civilization so advanced it had learned to shape energy itself. And then the slow decline, the acceptance that all things must end. The tests were not puzzles, the voice explained. They were windows into your hearts. We needed to see what you value before entrusting you with our legacy. And you, human in your ancient garments, you chose well. You chose cooperation over conquest. You chose sharing over hoarding. You chose to preserve knowledge, not weaponize it. Trent found his voice. But the Krellians came with weapons. They saw you as a threat. Yes, their immediate response was violence. This is common among young species. But watch what happens next. Through the viewport, Trent saw something remarkable. The Krellian ships were receiving the same mental transmission he was on his communication array. He could hear confused voices, Shakros shouting orders that his crew couldn't follow because they were too stunned by what they were experiencing. And then Trent did something that surprised even himself. He opened a channel to the Krellian flagship. Warlord Shakros, this is Commander Trent. I know you can hear the Architect's message. I know you understand what this ship really is now. He paused, choosing his words carefully. The Leviathan has judged us both. It disabled your weapons because you came in aggression. But I want you to know something. Humanity has been where you are. He touched the medals on his uniform. I'm wearing the dress uniform of Earth's 22nd century. Do you know what humans were doing then? We were killing each other. Nuclear weapons, biological warfare, environmental destruction. We nearly destroyed ourselves a dozen times. These traditions, this uniform, these protocols, they were born from learning to step back from the edge. Shakros's voice came through, quieter now, uncertain. Why are you telling me this, human? Because the architects left this gift for all species, not just the ones who pass every test perfectly. They understood that growth requires mistakes, that wisdom comes from learning. Trent looked at the glowing Leviathan. I want to propose something, not as enemies, but as two young species who both need what's inside that ship. Shared access, joint research, a neutral ground where we learn together. The silence stretched long. Trent could hear arguments in the background of the Krellian transmission. Warriors demanding Shakros reject this weakness. Others, quieter voices, suggesting that perhaps the human had a point. Finally, Shakro spoke. Your uniform, it represents warriors, yes? Fighters. Yes, Trent said. But warriors who learn that fighting isn't always the answer. Warriors who learn to serve something bigger than war. Another long pause. Then, incredibly, Shakros replied, I will consider your proposal. I must consult with my government. But I will not fire on you today, Commander Trent. The architects have given me much to think about. The Leviathan pulsed brighter, and Trent felt approval from the ancient presence. Docking ports opened across the massive vessel, hundreds of them, inviting ships to enter and explore. But then a new hologram appeared above the console. A star map with hundreds of glowing points scattered across the galaxy. The architect's voice returned, carrying a note of warning. This is the first key, young ones. But beware, we were not the first. We inherited our knowledge from those who came before, and not all their gifts were given freely. 6 months had changed everything. Trent stood at the window of the rebuilt Erebus 7 station and watched ships of a dozen different species dock at the Leviathan. Humans, Krellians, Centauri, Polians, former enemies working side by side. They called the ancient vessel the Archives now, and it had become the most important place in known space. He still wore his old uniform. It had become a symbol somehow, recognized across the galaxy. The human who talked down a war fleet while wearing ceremonial dress. The man who chose cooperation when violence would have been easier. He wasn't sure he deserved a reputation, but he wore it as best he could. Commander Trent, you need to see this. Dr. Sarah Chun, a young researcher, approached with a tablet. Her expression was troubled. The deep exploration team found something in the archive's core, a sealed vault. Trent followed her to the command center, where a holographic display showed the discovery. Deep inside the Leviathan, past libraries and gardens and data halls, was a massive door. Unlike everything else in the ship, this door was sealed with warnings in dozens of languages, including architect script. Dr. Rahman, the granddaughter of the original researcher, was translating. It says, "We, the architects, were not the first children of the stars. We inherited our knowledge from the predecessors. But their gifts came with a price, a debt we could not pay. When you open this vault, you inherit our burden." The command center fell silent. Trent stared at the hologram, his mind racing. The architects, so advanced they seemed like gods, had themselves been students of something even older. And whatever they'd learned had cost them something terrible. "There's more," Ramon continued. "The vault has a timer. It's set to open automatically in 10 years, unless we actively choose to open it sooner or permanently seal it." The debate that followed was fierce. The Krellian delegates wanted to open it immediately. Ancient knowledge was too valuable to ignore. Some human scientists agreed. Others wanted to destroy the vault, fearing what might be inside. A few suggested sealing it forever and pretending it didn't exist. Trent listened to them all, remembering the lessons of the past months. Finally, he raised his hand for silence. 6 months ago, we were enemies, he said, looking around the room at representatives from species that had been at each other's throats for generations. The architects gave us their knowledge not because we were ready, but to help us become ready. They trusted us with a gift, and we've proven we can handle it responsibly. He gestured to the hologram. But this is different. The architects themselves were afraid of it. They sealed it with warnings. I propose we take their caution seriously. We have 10 years. Let's use them. Let's learn everything we can from the archives first. Let's strengthen our alliance. And when we're truly ready, not when we're curious or impatient, but when we're strong enough to handle whatever burden the predecessors left behind. Then we'll face it together. The vote was close, but Trent's proposal won. They would wait. They would prepare. They would grow. That night, as Trent was reviewing reports, alarms screamed across the station. He ran to the command center to find chaos. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the void. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, their signatures appearing on sensors like a swarm. But these weren't any ships they recognized. The hulls were ancient, covered in design similar to Leviathan but wrong somehow, corrupted, twisted. Where the archives glowed with peaceful light, these vessels pulsed with dark energy. A transmission came through, the audio distorted and mechanical. The translation system struggled before finally rendering it into words everyone could understand. Archival unit detected. Compliance protocol initiated. Organic occupants, you have violated quarantine. The debt will be collected. The cycle will continue. Trent felt ice in his veins. The predecessors' servants. Whatever debt the architects couldn't pay, something had come to collect it from their inheritors. All ships battle stations, he ordered, his voice steady despite his fear. The coalition fleet, cobbled together from former enemies, designed for research, not war, began powering up weapons. Chakros appeared on the comm screen. The Krellian warlords faced grim. It seems we face our first test together, Commander. So it seems, Trent replied. He looked at the assembled fleet, at species who'd learned to work together, at the archives glowing behind them filled with knowledge they'd barely begun to explore. He opened a channel to all ships, his old uniform straight, his voice carrying the weight of humanity's stubborn refusal to give up. This is Commander Trent to all coalition forces. 6 months ago, we were enemies. Today, we stand together. These predecessors think they can intimidate us, think they can collect some ancient debt we never agreed to pay. But I've learned something about the species in this fleet. We don't surrender. We don't give up. And we definitely don't let anyone tell us we don't belong among the stars. Through the viewport, the hostile fleet advanced. Trent gripped the console, his ceremonial medals catching the light. All ships, whole formation, for the archives, for the Alliance, for everyone who dared to dream of reaching the stars. We hold a line here. The first shots lit up the void, and the battle for humanity's future began.